The agenda for tonight is a presentation. The PowerPoint portion will be short, I promise. And then after that, I'm going to try and show these tools and processes in a live demo. After that, we have a multiple choice quiz where the top 2 contestants will each win a 1-month VIP subscription to Hack the Box. In the second half of the meeting, we'll have a practical portion where you get the chance to try these new tools on the 3 boxes in our dedicated lab. Nicholas and I will be very happy to assist anyone during this time if you need to get a virtual machine up or access to Hack the Box itself or any other general getting started type questions. Some housekeeping. The presentation is going to be recorded and uploaded to YouTube. So if you don't want to be famous, please switch off your video and sound. We do have some other events like CTFs and discussions and so on the Hack South Discord in between meetups. So if you're interested in any of that, please have a look around. Also, feel free to share your LinkedIn or Twitter links. I'll add you. This is totally optional, but some of us do want to network as well. If you have any questions or want to add anything that might benefit others, please type it in the general chat help channel on Discord during the presentation. I'll pause after each section and try and answer what I can. Lastly, a light disclaimer, I'm not a security professional. I'm a software developer and I spent quite a lot of time on Hack the Box. But we do actually have quite a few professional penetration testers and security researchers with a lot of experience on Discord. So if you have any advanced questions or want some career advice, ask away and I'm sure some of those guys can help out. So, enumeration. This is really just the systematic process of information gathering. This process or methodology is a little different for everyone. You can start out with a prescribed process and there are a few online you can go and find and use. But over time you'll learn what works for you and what you like, and you'll begin to develop your own methodology. The process on Hack the Box is quite simple. It begins with information gathering until it results in vulnerability discovery. This is often the longest part of the process, but luckily not like the real world. On Hack the Box, we know there is a critical vulnerability somewhere, so it's just a matter of time and perseverance to find it. Once the vulnerability is found, it needs to be exploited to gain additional access. These 4 steps is an iterative process of getting more access and finding more information until you have full admin access to the target computer. When people talk about enumeration on Hack the Box, they're talking of one of 2 steps. Either looking for the way to hack into the machine or looking for the way to go from a limited user level to administrator. Real-world security penetration testing includes a few additional steps, like gathering data from public sources, like LinkedIn, Twitter, and so on, and also professional report writing. I've added some of the well-known framework methodology steps here as well, but on Hack the Box it's really simplified. We don't really care about public information gathering, and we don't really worry about maintaining access and covering tracks because the machines do get reset. Today we're only looking at the initial enumeration, so going from nothing to something and finding that first vulnerability. Hack the Box provides a name of the machine, and it's usually the host name, but not always. They provide the operating system, but not always. Sometimes they have a question mark there. And they always provide an IPv4 address, so that's the 10.10.10. something. Initial enumeration is the process of taking that and finding all sorts of other things. We want to find all the running services and then see if we can find some files, some databases maybe, sometimes printers. There's, in most of the boxes, there's web applications, but not always. You'll get some backups, and sometimes you'll even get malware, or where someone already breached the box and you just need to follow on their tracks. You'll also get the actual machine operating system, so not just Windows or Linux, but you'll get the server build version, or you'll know exactly which version of Ubuntu Linux or Debian Linux or whatever flavor of Linux it is. We do need to discuss the difficulty level. So different machines require different levels of effort and knowledge. So sometimes you arrive and you do enumeration and you know exactly what to do next. Other times, if you're lucky still, you know what's needed, but you also know you don't have the skill to do it. And other times you really just know what you're supposed to be doing. As you do more boxes and get more experience though, you'll see the vulnerabilities faster and be able to exploit them even better. In the beginning, everything's going to be frustrating. So if you've never done a Hack the Box before and have limited knowledge on enumeration and security testing, it's going to be really difficult. But as soon as you get those first few flags, you'll already have enough experience to tackle some of the medium boxes. Eventually, after a few months on Hack the Box, you may do a box without learning anything new at all. And then it's becoming too easy or even boring. So they need to provide a spread of difficulty levels for everyone to have a good time. My advice for if you're new and you're getting frustrated and you don't know what to do, just acknowledge that feeling, because it's normal. It shouldn't be a feeling of giving up or breaking down your ego. It should actually energize you, and I know it's difficult, but it should create a feeling of I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but I'm going to figure it out, and I'm going to learn something new, and then I'll never forget that. But yeah, some boxes like Rope 2 are just unreasonable for everyone. Tools. So when doing information gathering, tools is critically important, and there are a lot of tools. Too many tools, really. I'm only going to demo a few of the very common ones. And the beginning tool when getting started on a box is universally Nmap. It was released in 1997 and has been evolving and growing ever since. It's most commonly used to do port scanning, find services, and then find the version numbers for those services, and also check for vulnerabilities on those services. Nmap can do a lot more though. So it can even exploit services themselves. There's quite a lot of exploitation scripts included. And the tool includes a whole scripting engine, so you can actually write your own additional scripts to add features to Nmap. A lot of people have tried to build their own replacements for Nmap, but as soon as they dig into all of the features, they invariably just give up. We're also going to have a brief look at Burp. So Burp is a web proxy by Portswigger, that's the company. And this tool allows you to inspect any traffic that goes between your browser and a web server. You can also mess with the inputs, so you can modify what goes to the web server and see if you find any security issues. It's also a tool with quite a lot of advanced features as well, which we're not going to look at, but it has a whole plugin ecosystem and a lot of automation bits to it as well. We're also going to have a quick look at GoBuster. So I like using GoBuster and FUF for web fuzzing. So that's when you want to find out what files and folders are on a web server, but the website just doesn't list everything, so you can't just see it. So you have to use a very large word list and guess until it actually finds something. So the two leading tools at the moment, I would say, are GoBuster and Fuff. And both of these are written in the Go programming language, which makes it really easy to write solid, multi-threaded code that runs on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS X. Some older tools include Dirb, Dirbuster, and wfuzz. If you use Dirb or Dirbuster, you should check out GoBuster. And if you like wfuzz, then check out Fuff, because it has a similar interface. If you do password spraying, so that's when you have a list of usernames and a list of passwords, and it can be a massive list that you just want to guess. I like using Hydra, but I often use crackmap exec because it does a few other things as well, and I'll show that in this demo tonight. There are quite a lot of other tools, really too many to mention. When doing enumeration and I find a service that I haven't seen before, or even some that I've seen before but I've forgot how to actually enumerate them, I'll just Google for enumeration and the name. So enumeration SMTP, or enumeration POP3, or enumeration Redis, and you'll definitely find some blog posts and tools and things to help you out. But sometimes on the harder boxes, you have to write your own tools because there's a custom developed protocol or very complex messages in a well-known protocol that you need to build with a scripting language or something. I'm going to begin with a tool called AutoRecon, and I'll tell you why I'm going to show that. But also have a look at IPsec videos. So IPsec is one of the Hack the Box guys who every week releases the video for the box that gets retired and walks through exactly how to solve it. And sometimes he shows multiple ways to solve it, but he makes an effort of showing you the best new tools to do the type of exploitation and enumeration needed. So it's a really good source for finding out about the new best tools to use. Right, so I'm going to jump into the demos. I'm going to look at all three boxes in our dedicated lab, but just the initial part. So all of you will be able to mimic this afterwards in the lab and go from that initial part to the next step if you want. So we're going to look at three boxes. The first one is Admira. Admira was retired about 2 weeks ago, almost 2 weeks ago, and that means it's still available on the free tier. So you can still do it after the dedicated lab closes. It will still be available to you on Hack the Box. SneakyMailer is still active, so we're not going to go, I'm not going to go too deep into it. You guys can solve it afterwards in the practical portion. It's still active, so you can also still access it on the free tier. Monteverde has been retired for a while, so it's not available anymore. I wanted to include it because it shows a few interesting Windows enumeration things that's very good to know, because quite a few of the boxes on Hack the Box are Windows boxes. And I'm also going to show the new Zerologon exploit. So the exploit POC was released about 2 weeks ago, and it's been making a lot of news around the world because it basically goes from no access to the network, or no authenticated access to the network, to full domain takeover on Windows. Just one other thing to note before we dive in. There's sometimes some good tips in the cover art for the boxes. So I'm showing the SneakyMailer art on the right hand side, and you'll see there's a guy fishing. and he just caught some snake type thing. And if you've done Hack the Box for a while, you'll know that there's a very well-known language called Python, and everyone refers to Python as the snake thing. So they'll give you a tip to use the snake thing, then you know you need to do something with Python. The first box we're looking at is called Admiro, and I just created a Meetup folder with the 3 folders for Admiro, SneakyMailer, and Monteverde. The first thing I'm going to do is ping the Admiro IP address, and I think it's 187, and we get a reply back. We know that's the IP address. We got it from Hack the Box, and we know it's a Linux box. The first tool I'm going to show you is called AutoRecon. So AutoRecon is a tool written really for the OCP certification, because it only does information gathering, because in OCP you're not allowed to use any automated exploitation frameworks. So this tool really draws the line at just gathering information as much as it can, and it also recommends some automatic exploitation processes for you, commands to run and so on. So AutoRecon, you can get it on GitHub at Tiberius with a 3 instead of an E, AutoRecon. And using it is as easy as typing AutoRecon and IP address, and it will get the information and put it in the local folder. I want to be in the Admiro folder there. AutoRecon and IP address. You should really run it as an elevated user. I'm just going to cancel that and go back up. So you'll see that the UDP scan failed because Nmap actually requires root rights to run UDP scans. And running as elevated user also makes your Nmap commands quite a bit faster, because it only does the SYN part of the whole TCP handshake and not the whole SYN-ACK. It doesn't complete it, so it goes a bit faster on the port scanning side. So I'm going to just switch to super user and try that again. Before I do that, I'm going to delete the results folder. You'll also see I have a dry run folder in here from when I did it before, just in case I need it. And I'll go AutoRecon and the IP address. Don't want all of that. So now it's running. And the reason I'm recommending this is it shows you exactly what it does, and that makes it quite nice for learning, especially if you're new. So I'm just going to the commands file that it created so far, and what's cool about it is it actually does quite a lot of things, and depending on what it finds, it decides to do additional scans. So it has a inbuilt decision tree. The first 3 things it does Nmap scans for all the ports. So this -p- means everything. That takes a long time. So while that's running, it's also doing the top 20, but this SU means UDP. So it's doing the top 20 UDP ports. When looking at machines, you can have ports exposed on TCP and UDP, and you can also have different ports exposed on different IP addresses. So you might have different ports exposed on IPv6 than on IPv4, and you might even have multiple IPv4 addresses, but not on Hack the Box generally. Then the last one, it doesn't specify any ports. So what this does by default is it takes the top 1000 most common ports. And if you have a look at the Nmap documentation, they in part of their documentation they ask, well, what are the most common ports? Then they have a write-up on how they decided these, and they did quite a lot of research to find the most used ports on networks. And the most used one is HTTP for web applications, then Telnet, then SSL, like TLS, web ports, FTP, and so on. These are just the top 20. So without specifying anything else, it's just going to do, well, it's actually going to do the top 1000. I'm just going to close this file and open it again because it's actually gone further now. So you'll see now that it's found port 21 is open, it's going to do nmap again, but it's going to say, oh, include all the FTP scripts, but no brute forcing, no broadcast, no denial of service, no external, no fuzzer scripts. So this is really because it's not really allowed by OSCP. So that's really why these are excluded. You'll see the same thing on port 22, which is SSH. So it includes a bunch of SSH automated scripts. It doesn't have an asterisk in there like with the FTP one. So they don't have to say, oh, but exclude the brute forcing ones. And so on. So there's one for port 80, which is web. So you'll see HTTP in there. And because there's asterisk again, it excludes a bunch of the automated exploitation scripts. After all the nmap stuff is done, it's going to do a call. So this is just download the landing page, and it's going to save it as dcp_80_http index.html. It's also going to grab the robots file. So the robots file is what tells scanners like the Google search bot and Bing and DuckDuckGo and all of the search bots on the internet to ignore certain files or specifically go and look at certain files for sitemaps and so on. If this tool is available, it's going to take a screenshot of the landing page. I generally don't install this because there are some exploits against it. So someone can have a malicious page that actually exploits this tool. So I generally don't like to use it when, like in automated scripts at least. WhatWeb, this is a tool that grabs information about what tools were used to build a certain site. Nikto is another tool used on HTTP sites that it comes with a little inbuilt database of common vulnerabilities and things that it looks for. So it just looks to see if anything useful is available. Then it's going to run GoBuster, which I mentioned before, and GoBuster is just going to fuzz for any interesting files. So we'll look at that in a second. This whole process actually runs for about 25 minutes, so I'm going to stop it and actually show you the one in my dry run folder, which I let complete. You'll also see that AutoRecon creates a bunch of folders for you, so it creates a folder where you can add your exploit scripts and generated payloads and things. So you can put it in there. I generally don't use these folders. Also a loot folder. So this is for anything you download from the machine. So if you have a list of usernames or interesting files or memory dumps or anything useful, you can save it in there. The report, that's for report writing. So you can have your favorite report writing tool open and save files in there. But the one that's important is really the scans, because that's where it outputs everything it created. It also creates this manual commands, so that's what it recommends you run manually after it's completed. So these are some of the actual exploits which you should do on OSCP but isn't allowed to automate. So that's why it's recommending you do these. But yeah, these these specifically aren't so useful, because you'll see this one does, it basically guesses usernames and passwords on the FTP, but it's usually better to begin with normal enumeration first and see if you find anything, but it's also a good idea to run these in the background. So if you want to run some brute forcing in the background, why not? You can do the same thing on the SSH port, try guessing usernames and passwords, and on HTTP, so it tells you these are all the dirbuster and gobuster and dir search and so on commands you can run to do some fuzzing. There's not a lot in here. Oh, there's also one for WordPress. So this doesn't say WordPress was found. It just says, well, you can use this if WordPress was found. But I don't think WordPress is on this box, so it's not really useful. Then you can really begin by diving into these files. I usually look at the full TCP output from Nmap first. So this is what it looks like. It shows you that port 21 is open and it's FTP, and it also gives you, very importantly, the actual version number and service name. So you can Google that and see if there are any known vulnerabilities for that version. SSH is open. Similarly, we get the version number. We also get Debian, so it says this is the Debian distribution of Linux. And if you Google this version string, I'm sure you can find exactly which release of Debian it is. On port 80, that's the web one. It says it's running Apache web server. Also the version number, so you can check if that's vulnerable to anything. What's quite interesting in here is it points out that there's a robots file and there's a disallowed entry in there. So that's something that tells web browsers, don't look in this folder, don't look at this file. And that's always something that's interesting to look at. So in this case, it's saying there's this admin directory and don't look in there. So obviously we're going to look in there. Some other things that are quite useful to look at. So TCP 21 is quite good. That's the FTP. So Nmap should actually show that anonymous access is open if it is open. In this case, it's not saying it, so it's probably not open. So to get into this FTP server, we'll likely need either a exploit, so like a publicly released exploit, or some user credentials. We can have a quick look at the SSH server as well. This is not that useful. There's a lot of information here, but all of these keys and algorithms and things, it's not really useful to us. It's just public keys. It looks impressive, but it's probably not going to help us. It also gives us the version number. I did do one box where there was a vulnerable version of OpenSSH on the box, so it's useful sometimes to Google that as well. The more interesting bits, so Nikto always has some good things to look at when it comes to web scanning, and in this case it doesn't really have much, but it also says, oh, look at the robots.txt file because it contains one entry that should be manually viewed. And I think it actually downloaded the robots file, so we can have a look. And this is what it says. So in the robots file, it says all user agents, so all bots. And then there's a comment that says this folder contains personal contacts and creds. Okay, that's useful to know. So no one, not even robots, should see it. Waldo. And don't dismiss the usefulness of names. So definitely write down Waldo somewhere because you might need it later for if you run out of ideas, you can try that as a username in a password in a password spray attack. And it says disallow the admin directory. So it says basically don't crawl that directory and put anything in Google. Before we actually look into that folder, I want to show you some other tools that are similar to AutoRecon. So there's a tool called Legion, which is very similar. It's not that frequently updated. And if you look at the GitHub repo, you can see it's got full pen testing methodology. So if you haven't done enough of this, definitely have a look at that and see what they say you should do, because it's a good jumping off point to develop your own methodology. And Legion is very similar to AutoRecon. I think there's a bit more configuration you can do up front, so you can say which modules you want to run, and then it's going to do all of those. But it's really just also running other tools, so it's running Hydra and GoBuster and all sorts of things. It can also do a automatic scan, so you just say start general and then it will do the general testing. There's also a user interface tool called Sparta in Kali Linux. I haven't actually used this because I really actually open the user interface of Kali. I usually just SSH into the machine. So it's a GUI, and you can just add the IP addresses and say go, and it will do similarly run Nmap and Nikto and tools based on what it finds. So those three definitely worth a look if you are getting started, and it will give you some tools to run manually later. I actually still use AutoRecon, so when I begin a new box, I do a manual scan first, and then I kick off AutoRecon to run in the background, because it usually takes about 30 minutes or so. And then when I run out of ideas, like I usually do, I just go and troll through the AutoRecon folder to see if I missed anything obvious. Something else I just want to mention is a tool called Nessus Essentials. So this is a free security scanner that I would recommend using at home. So if you want to see what's going on your home network, this is quite interesting to have a look at. Just scan and you'll find all sorts of things you didn't know about, and it's going to look at versions and known issues and things. So it gives you a nice report at the end to say your TV is out of date, or your there's a FTP server open on your IoT device you didn't know about. So it's quite good to just play around with. I've had quite a lot of fun with it. So going back to this Admira box, I'm going to show you a tool called Burp. So Burp is that web proxy I mentioned. This is what it looks like when you launch it. I'm just going to go back to my browser, and so something else I always do is I type in the I think this will be easier to explain. So if I go into a web browser and I type in admira.hdb to actually see what that website looks like, it's not going to resolve, right? Because it doesn't know about admira.hdb. It's not a public DNS. So the way to get around that is to tell your box about it. So you want to edit your etc hosts file. So you just you have to do it as super user, so sudo vi or whatever editor you want to use, etc hosts with an S, and then just add the actual machine name and IP address. So it's 10.10.10.187, and so IP address first and then the name afterwards. I'm also going to add Monteverde and SneakyMailer Salon. So once I've done that and I try it again, it actually loads it up. So this is what's running on admira.hdb. I'm going to push this through Burp. So I'm using a Firefox with a plugin called Foxy Proxy. So I can quickly switch between running it through burp or not. So I'm just going to switch it on. When I try and reload it, burp actually lights up and highlights this proxy tab. So it says intercept is on. So I just usually switch that off when using burp on Hack the Box to just log everything basically. Something I always do in burp is to limit the scope. So I go to target, scope, use advanced scope control. So this gives me more flexibility in defining the scope. So scope is just to filter out anything I don't really want to see and only show me the Hack the Box stuff. So I say anything that includes .htb and also any 10.10.10 IP addresses. So it's only going to show those instead of when I open Google or do anything else, it's not going to show that in here. So we saw there's a robots file, so let's just have a look at that, robots.txt. And this is exactly what we saw earlier. So it says don't look at the admin directory. And when we look at the admin directory, it says, well, you don't have permission. And this is really saying that you don't have permission to list the folders in this directory. It doesn't necessarily mean you don't have access to the folders, you just don't have permission to get a listing of all the folders. So we can begin guessing, and the robots file said there's personal contacts and creds in here. So we can go contacts. For some reason it dropped the HTTP part, contacts. So I'm just guessing contacts, maybe creds. So it's not finding anything. We can also do it in burp. So in burp you can say, you can look at the requests. So this is what the raw request looked like. It said get or try and get that, and then on the right hand side it shows the response. It says no, not found, and this is the HTML that shows in the browser. So we can say send it to the repeater. So the repeater is just a place where you can mess with this now. So you can say try get personal creds, personal dash creds, maybe personal underscore creds, send it again. Just to make sure we are in the right place, we can say, or that this is a valid folder. We can also try admin with a different directory, and then it says, well, this one's not found, but this one is forbidden. So it means there's definitely a folder there, and there might be some files in it, but we'll need to guess what the names are or subfolders. So that's really where web fuzzing comes in, and I'm going to show you a tool called GoBuster. So GoBuster is what you use to find files in web directories. So you can say GoBuster dir. I'll actually just look at all the commands. So GoBuster dir, and then U for the URL. So HTTP admirer.htb. I think it's admin-dir. Just want to double check that. Yes, it is. And in there we want to look for files using a word list. And the list I'm using, I'm actually cheating a bit because I know this list has both fairly high up, just to save some time. I'm going to use the common word list from Seclist. So there's actually one of the ones I actually usually use anyway. Seclists, discovery, web content, common. And to make it go even faster, I'm going to say use 50 threads. Just going to send that to the top, and that looks right, so run. And it's going to send in, it's going to do what I did in burp manually. It's just going to automate that and do it very fast. So it's already done like 2,500. So it found something called contacts.txt and credentials.txt. So we'll just have a look at those. In burp again, I'm just going to say contacts.txt. So now we've got a file, and we see there's a list of email addresses. So these are potential usernames. So I would put all of these, including Waldo that we saw earlier, in a file called users, and all the email addresses I'll put in a file called emails or something. The other one is called credentials. Let's see what's in there. And here we see internet mail account, username and password, it looks like. FTP account, username and password. And a WordPress account. Okay, so maybe there is WordPress on the server. So it says admin and WordPress 01 exclamation mark. So this I consider a really good find, because we can probably get into the FTP server with this. So I would call this the foothold, and that's Admira. So going on to the next box. The second box we're looking at is called SneakyMailer. Now this one is still active, so I'm not going to go too deep, but I'll show you the initial parts. And I already did the auto recon bit, so I'm not going to do that again, and this is what it found. So you can immediately see there's a FTP server, IMAP, SSH, SMTP, and then a bunch of things on the web application. So we can see that it looks like there's two different web apps on 8080 and 80, and another IMAP server on 993, and that looks like it. So let's just have a look at the full Nmap scan to confirm that. Port 21, we see VSFTP running. It doesn't say anonymous was enabled, so it might not be, but we'll have a look in the detailed FTP scan as well. SSH, we also get the version numbers, nothing much interesting there. SMTP, so this is a service used to send emails, which is usually quite interesting, especially some of these commands that it supports, like verify. So verify allows you to send in a list of guest email addresses, and it will tell you which of your guesses are right. So it's usually quite nice to verify names. Port 80, we see there's a web application running, and the interesting bit here is it's saying when it tried to access the web application on the IP address, it said no, go to sneakycorp.hdb, so use a different host name. On port 143, it found IMAP. So IMAP is also a type of email server. This is typically for logging in, getting a list of email boxes, being able to get messages from those boxes, move messages around between boxes and flag them as read or deleted. So it's basically like the protocol level for something like a Gmail, where you see a bunch of email boxes where you can move things around. It's got a certificate on it for TLS that's only saying the common name is localhost. So these certificates are usually quite nice for getting additional host names. So we already got sneakycorp.hdb, but there might be some others. And there's a lot of public key things, which is not really useful. On port 993, it's running another IMAP. So this one is a TLS version. And it's also got a bunch of public certificates, which is not that interesting. On port 8080, there's the second web application running, and it's just saying welcome to Nginx, so that looks like a default page, and nothing else really interesting here. So we'll just have a quick look at the FTP. It's not saying anonymous access is available, so it's probably not, but we can try it if we run out of ideas. Port 25, so we'll look at the SMTP user enumeration. So it actually tried to use that verify method using a tool called smtp-user-enum. You can get it at this URL, Pentest Monkey. So it tried a very short list of 17 names and it didn't find anyone. Then there's the two web applications. We saw that the one redirected to a different page, which is quite interesting. And but I'm not going to, well, we can have a look at the Nikto outputs. So let's see, Nikto. There's nothing really in this one, and in the other one, yeah, nothing either. So sometimes there's some good information in there. Now the first thing I'll try and do is actually go to the website. So I'll type SneakyMailer.hdb and I already have this in my hosts file. And when I do that, it tries to go to Sneaky Corp, which I don't have in my host file, so therefore it's not going to find it. I'm also going to the second application, which is on 8080. So this one just says running Nginx, so nothing quite useful on here. To fix this one, I'll just need to basically add this to my host file. So I'll say sudo edit and add it to the end, sneakycorp.hdb, and then this should work. So the interesting thing that you should notice about this is it's the same server, the same port, but based on the name you pass in, you get a different website. And that's something called virtual hosting. So you can have one host that hosts multiple websites, and based on the name you request, it gives you a different website. And you see that quite a lot on Hack the Box. So while this is open, I'm just going to do another scan called a vhost scan. So it's actually looking for additional virtual hosts. So if you see one of those type of things, there's usually some others. So I'm going to use a tool called GoBuster. Well, I used it before, but I haven't used the vhost mode. So vhost is basically going to guess at the prefixes for this. So it's going to guess something like work.sneakycorp and then mail.sneakycorp. So it's going to go through a word list really, really fast and find anything that returns a different result than the normal landing page. And the word list I'm going to use, I can probably just use anyone, but I'll use the sect lists, discovery, web, raft, directories, say medium directories, lowercase, and I'll do 50 threads, why not? And I think that should do it. And you can see right off the bat it finds dev.sneakycorp.hdb. So to actually access that, we need to add it to a host file again. So same process, dev.sneakycorp.hdb. Then if I go to the website, I should be able to access it. If I just type HTTP. And this looks like the same site, but if you look at the two side by side, this one just says Sneaky Corp, this one says dev, and it has this register bit here as well. So this one just says create an account, we can try it, but there's actually nothing here. What I usually try and do is some SQL injection or so if there's a register page, there might be a logon page, but in this case there isn't, so I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. The other interesting thing on this site is the this team tab. So in here, there's actually quite a prize if you're doing penetration testing, because now I've got a bunch of usernames, email addresses, you even know who's the authority figures, so you can do quite a lot of work with this. Just while that's running, I'm just going to kick off an additional GoBuster process to do virtual hosts on the one running on port 8080. So that can also run for a while. This one really just found dev.sneakycorp.htb. So I'm just going to close that because we already have that. Now, there are quite a few threads we can try and follow with this, but I'm going to go right to what actually worked for us when I did this box the first time, and I did it with Nicholas and RFC, and it was quite a fun box to do. Just want to create a different tab so I can put all my usernames in here, and that's it. Now what I want to do is do a clone of this website and then try and fish these users. So I'm going to send them an email saying, please come and register on my cloned website, and then try and grab some usernames and passwords. So that's really the way into this box, but I'll show you how to do it because it's quite a cool process. But before we actually got to that point, we tried a lot of different things until we eventually, just out of pure desperation, tried this, and it worked, and we were actually quite surprised. So to do this, I'm going to run a tool called the Social Engineering Toolkit, and it needs to be run with super user rights. I'm just going to say run SE Toolkit, and this is a tool from TrustedSec. I'm going to share a list of all these tools afterwards, and you can see how to install them from their sites. And if you need help installing anyone, just reach out and I'll help you get it up and running. So we're going to do, from this menu, say, oh, we want to do a social engineering attack, please. We want to do a website attack, so that's number 2. And in our case, I want to do a simple credential harvester, so that's number 3. And I want to clone a site, yes please. And so the first thing it asks is, where do I want to host this on my machine? So I need to get my IP address. So I can say IP, I just want my IPv4 address, and I think this is how you do it. Just so you don't need to do that, you could just type IP and it will show a bunch of information, but just to limit it to the IPv4 address, I typed it like that. So that's where I want to send it. I'm just going to close this. The URL you want to clone, so I want to clone this registration page, please. And it's done. So if I now in a browser go to my own machine, it should look the same. So let's just do a quick side by side. This is the original, this is mine. And if I try and register, let's say whatever at sneakycorp.htb and a very secure password, and I click register, it's going to hit my credential harvester saying, oh, we got a hit, someone tried to register, this is their email address, this is their password. So that's running. Now the second part of this is we want to send these users an email to say, oh, please come and have a look and register please on my fake one, not the original one. To do that, I'm going to run a second instance of the social engineering toolkit. It's also a social engineering attack, but this one is number 5, a mass email attack. And I want to email with a list. And the first thing it asks is, okay, what's the list? So we have a list of, just let me get to this, a list of users in this format. So it's got full name tab, job tab, location tab, email address. So we want the 4th column. So you could have pasted this into Excel and copied the 4th column, or you could have done it manually in Notepad. I'm trying to learn Org, so I'm going to try and use this. Luckily, I've done this before in preparation, so I'm going to get it right, I think. and I want to print the fourth column split on tabs from the users file, and there I get all the email addresses, and I'll put this in a file called emails.txt. I'm just going to cheat slightly because this mail server is super slow, and I know this poll bird is the one that's going to click on my link, so I'm just going to move him to the third place to not spend 20 minutes waiting for this thing. Right, so now that we've got that file, let's just get the path. So it's in this folder and it's called emails.txt. Emails.txt. And it's asking me, do I want to send from Gmail or from another email server? So we want to use the one open on SneakyMailer. And so the first thing it asks is, what's the from address? So we could say this is it@SneakyMailer, but let's go big, let's use the CEO. So the CEO is emailing everyone saying you have to go and check out this new website. And we'll get the name as well. So it's asking for the name that the user needs to see, just to remind them that this is the CEO. Or maybe not, because that might look suspicious if it's not like that. Then it's asking for a username and password, so we're using blanks. I should probably have tested that before, but I did it before this meetup, so I know it works. And we'll just use SneakyMailer.htb. And the port number, we saw that SMTP is open on port 25. Flag it as high priority, yes please. No file, no inline attachment. Email subject, we'll say the new Pi server is, well, let's be very careful not to do any typos, so nothing should give away that this is a phishing email, is now available. Right, plain text, why not? I think it would probably be better to do it as a proper HTML email and get the users signature and everything, but I don't have that, so I'm not going to even try. So I'm just going to say in the email body, please register at this website, so HTTP, like that, and yeah, just like that, and provide feedback. That looks good. End, send, and this should now loop through all the email addresses and one by one actually send it to the users. It takes a while. I think it takes about 20 seconds or so per email address. So that's why I just moved that one that I know is vulnerable to the top, well, to the third place. So we'll just wait for a few seconds and then it should go through. Now, I just need to note that this is more complicated than it is actually on the box, because there's really just a bot on the other side, and you really don't need to worry about really cloning the site, because you could just email the user that URL with any content and it will be followed. So I'm just showing what the real world type of process would be. So my social engineering toolkit actually broke. I think it's the way that message came through, but so I looked at this in a raw packet capture, and I saw that the URL isn't actually passed through like a normal post request would, but the rest of the message is fine. So it probably needs a change in the social engineering toolkit, but in the real world, this wouldn't happen. But the key thing is we did get a hit, and we got poll, and we got a proper password. So this looks like a proper secure password. We wouldn't have guessed this from an email, from a password list anyway. So there's the foothold for this machine. Right. Any questions? The third and final box we're looking at is called Monteverde. And the first thing I'm going to do is try and ping this machine to see if it's up yet, because I just launched it now. And it's running. So like previously, I also did the dry run with auto recon. So I'm just going to look at those scans. And the first thing you'll see in the directory list is it looks a bit different. There's no port 21, there's no port 22 for SMB. We have some UDP ports open, well, at least one UDP port open. So let's just dive right into the full Nmap scan. So this shows quite a few ports open, and this is typical of Windows boxes where there's quite a lot going on, and I honestly don't understand all of it yet, but I'll go through this and tell you what I do understand. So port 53, that's DNS typically. It's what you use to look up other machine names. So I might ask for a different machine on this network, and this machine might respond with the IP address for it. Port 8080 is open, that's Kerberos security. And this is usually a bit of a giveaway that you are looking at a domain controller if you see DNS and Kerberos and LDAP open. It means it's the main machine on a Windows network that provides directory services and basically ties the whole network together. All the usernames and passwords for everyone on the network is on that machine. Well, I should say not the plain text passwords, but at least the hashes. All the domain objects and everything is contained in the LDAP database on this machine. So we are looking at a domain controller. You can even see the domain name. It's called megabank.local. So this is on the LDAP port. We also see NetBIOS open and some RPC ports, so we can try and use RPC client or similar. I think port 445 and port 139 together are the SMB ports. So we chatted about SMB in the previous meetup. So I think the 445 one is used for file shares, and the 139 is typically for RPC, but don't quote me on that, I might be completely wrong. Then port 464, that's also a Kerberos password port. So there's also RPC port open. 636, I don't know what that is. When Nmap says TCP warped, it basically just says this is a TCP service and it doesn't know what it is. That's how I understand that. Another LDAP port is open. I think one of them uses encryption and one not. And another TCP warped port. Then one of my favorite ports is 5985, which is the remote management port. So that's Windows Remote Management, which is basically like running PowerShell over HTTP to manage a machine remotely. And to use this, you typically need credentials for a user that is in the remote management group. Some other ports open. I don't understand all of these, so I'm not going to comment on those, but you usually do see these very high open ports when RPC is open. So I think it works in combination with the low ports to provide specific RPC services. And RPC, I should mention, is remote procedure call. So you can call RPC endpoints to get things like lists of printers and processors and users and all sorts of things on the machine. It's going down a bit, so it also includes the clock skew. So sometimes when you're doing Windows domain boxes, some of the tools will say, oh, your clock is out of step with the host machine. So there's a way to actually synchronize clocks so that they match up exactly. I think they need to be within the same minute for some of the authentication bits to work correctly. But don't quote me on that, I might be completely wrong. It's saying SMB2 is on, and it's saying message signing is enabled and required, which is also typically a sign of Active Directory controller, domain controller, because if message signing is required and enabled, I think that's typically disabled on normal client boxes running Windows 10. We do see UDP running, so let's just have a quick look. Nothing very interesting here, is just saying that UDP DNS is running, but there's nothing it automatically found that's useful in that. We could do some DNS things like, say, dig. No, I can't remember the name. I think it's 10.10.10.172. So that's the host we're going to use to do a DNS, and then we can say Monteverde, and it's not finding it. Let's try HTTP. So I'm hoping it returns the actual IP address of a box. I think I'm doing something wrong, but it should do some, it might be Mega Bank. So Monteverde is in the Mega Bank domain, and still don't get it. Why not? Local. Oh, there it goes. So the domain is actually, the full qualified domain name is megabank.local. So to do it for this box, you need to go monteverde.megabank.local. And I don't think we're going to find more. So it basically just gave us what we already had. But sometimes you can do a reverse lookup on this IP address and it shows you additional host names. I don't think it does in this case, and I don't think I'm running it right, so I'm not, ignore that. I should probably show some of the other scans. One of the good ones, but it's actually an oldie and it doesn't work very well anymore, is enum for Linux. So this typically works well on Windows domains to enumerate usernames and services and things. So sometimes it doesn't work at all. I think it tries to use a null user for RPC enumeration. So it says it found Megabank, it found the domain SID, which is just the ID number of the domain. Nothing much there. This bit is quite interesting. It's finding a bunch of usernames, so that's great. Here you see the same users again. And this is also quite good. So we're seeing the last logon time for users. So this user called AAD underscore and some hexadecimal stuff last logged on 3 October, which is just a few days ago. This user service ATA hasn't logged on at all. I think that's the initial number or initial date when you create a new account. So looking at last logon dates is usually quite useful on HackTheBox, because the users that have files and things happening have usually been logged into quite recently, when the box creator created the box at least. So I would prioritize the ones that have login dates and don't look at these too closely. But if I run out of ideas, I might. Going down, guest hasn't been used. Ray O'Leary hasn't been used. NetApp service hasn't been used. SA batch jobs has been used. So 6th January, that's around this time this box was created, so this one might be interesting. Dimitri Galanos, no. Mike Hope, yes. Okay, this user might also be interesting. It's around the same time as the previous one. We saw backup, well, this looks like backup execute. I'm not sure, it might just be execute. No. Sally Morgan, no. And yeah, not much else there. So the other thing that's good to look at is password policy. So if you're going to do brute forcing of passwords, it's good to know what the minimum length is, especially if the user is logged on recently. If you do brute very old accounts that haven't had any logons, then this might not be relevant, or just accounts that haven't been disabled and haven't been logged on for a very long time. They might have, or they might still have a password that's using the older version or the older setting for the minimum required length, or any of these requirements basically. One key thing to celebrate in this one is there's no lockout threshold. So we can just guess passwords and go crazy, and these accounts won't be locked. That's typically, you won't typically see that in well-configured domains as far as I understand. And yeah, you also see groups and things, but we actually have everything we need. Now this enum for Linux is quite old and creaky, so I don't generally use it anymore. There's another one called enum for Linux NG, which is quite good. So this just actually uses other tools like NMB lookup, net, RPC client, and SMB client to do exactly what enum for Linux does, and then it formats it very nicely. So I would recommend this one. I'm not going to show it now, but I'll include it in my list at the end. What we can do is use RPC client. So RPC client is a tool to connect to hosts and actually get a lot of information out. So I'm just going to use Monteverde.htb. When I try that, it's going to say, well, enter Carl's username, and that's me. So I actually want to pass in to say don't, like, user empty username. And I don't have any credentials, so I'm going to say user empty password as well. And sometimes this works. So this just means that there's anonymous access to RPC client, and you can type help to get a bunch of commands you can use. And the useful one in this case is called enum domain users. So we already saw the domain users, but you can get it in here as well. So these are all the domain users. I'm just going to grab all of that. So just from the command line, I'm going to say run enum domain users, and I want to write that to a file. So I'm just going to go, well, if I just run it like this, it's going to just write it out instead of logging into the RPC client. But I want this in a file called users.txt, or let's say RPC users.txt, and that should do it. So we should now have this file, but we actually only want this the username. So I'm going to use awk again, and I think you do it like this. Well, I know you do it like that. I practiced it, and I think then I do a print 2. It might be 1, I'll see in a bit. Okay, that worked. So I'm just going to put that in users.txt. Now for this box, I actually couldn't figure this box out. So when I did it the first time, I had a look on the forums to see if there are any hints. And someone said there's a lazy admin. And if you've done this for a while, you'll sort of learn the lingo. And lazy admin usually means that the password is the same as the username, or the password is the company name, or the password is the application name. If you're testing a web application, and say the web application's name is Django, and you try username admin and password Django, and that works. So it means it's a lazy admin that just uses the name of the same thing to set it up. So in this case, there's a lazy admin, and it's a bit of a spoiler, but it's the password is the username. So I'm going to use a tool called crackmap.exec, SMB on Monteverde.htb. I'm just showing this first, so this will just give me some additional information about the box. This is actually one of the things I run first when I do any Windows boxes, because it gives you the actual build number, the name of the host name of the machine, and the full domain name. It's also saying SMB signing is true, so that's sort of a sign of a domain controller, and it's saying SMB version 1 is disabled, so we won't be able to try things like Eternal Blue, which we did in the last meetup. But this is quite useful. We can also, I think, let me see if I can get some help on how to use this properly. I can now actually send in my list of usernames. So I want to say monteverde.htb and usernames, users, and passwords, users. And I think this will now actually try each of the usernames and passwords and tell me if any of them work. While that's going, I also want to show you this new Zerologon exploit. So this is an exploit that came out about 2 weeks ago. The vulnerability has been known to Microsoft earlier and patched, but quite a few people haven't updated their machines, and it's there's quite a lot of news around it at the moment. So just Google Zerologon and you'll find quite a lot of stuff in the popular press and in penetration testing sites. So I'll just git clone this repository, and on the top side you'll see that, okay, we've got a username and password. So SO-bash jobs, username, SO-bash jobs, password, that gets you into the machine. So that's the foothold. So we've got the foothold, but I also just want to show you this really nice exploit. I'm just going to run Python 3 on CVE and CVE like that. And it says you need to give me the domain controller name and the IP address. So I'm going to say Monteverde and 10.10.10.172, and that should do it. Now this runs for about a minute, and the really crazy and cool thing about this exploit is you don't need anything else. You don't need any usernames, you don't need any additional information on the network. You can just literally plug in, find the domain controller. Finding a domain controller is not that difficult, because it's the one that gets asked for all the information on the network. So you'll see some traffic. You'll probably see some DHCP things when you plug in on a network from that machine, and then you just find its name and IP address, and you do this, and it if it hasn't been patched, you have full domain access. Now what this does is, it's as far as I understand, it's a authentication exploit on the net logon service, And what it does, it confuses the servers to change the machine account. So each machine actually has a root account on its own. So not a username, it's actually the machine. It changes that password to empty. So we should now be able to get full machine access using an empty password. And the first thing you typically do, and it's on this PSC site as well, they say do a DC sync with secret stump. So I'll just use secretstump.py and say just DC. I think they say just DC and no pass. Well, let's leave the no pass. And I think it's mega bank and the machine. So the username is the machine name. So it's Monteverde. And these can be uppercase or lowercase. It doesn't really matter. Now the machine name always has a $sign at the end, and to escape it for my shell, I'm just doing that and saying this is at monteverde.htb, and this should ask for a password, but it's blank because of that exploit we did, and then it actually dumps all the machine hashes. And I'm just going to stop it there. Because I've got the most important one, which is the admin hashes. So this is quite useful, and you'll see it a lot in ActorBox. This is called the NTLM hashes. So you've got the username. I think this is the user ID, and you've got the LM hash, which isn't useful at all. You'll see all of them are the same. So it's AAD3 whatever. On all of these, and that's because they aren't used anymore. In the old days, they were quite easy to crack. I think there was something called rainbow tables that you could fit on a CD, and you could just go up to a computer, put in the CD, and actually exfiltrate the LM hash and crack it at the same time, and actually gain access to any Windows computer. This is back in the Windows XP early days. But the important one for us is the NT hash, and that's this one at the end. So with these hashes, we could try and crack it with a password list, but the cool thing is we don't even need to do that. We can just actually use Windows Remote Management with this hash and walk right in. So I'm going to use a tool called EvilWinRM. If I can spell it, I think I've got it in my tools folder, so I'll use that one. EvilWinRM. And so for this, you basically just give a machine's IP address or hostname. I think it works with that. Monteverde.htb, username, administrator, and hash. That one I copied, and this really just goes right in, or it should, and there it goes. So no need to do anything else on this machine. It's got full admin access. So this is quite a fun exploit, so if you want to try it, now's your chance. This Monteverde box isn't available to the free tier on ActorBox, but we've got it on our dedicated lab for the evening, so enjoy it. Any questions on Discord?